Whispers of Wren House. Story 1, The Tenant of Wren House. London, 1874. The city was a maze of smoke and rain that never seemed to end. Every street shivered with fog, every lamplight trembled as if afraid of what hid beyond its glow. Thomas Gray arrived with a single suitcase and a heart full of hope. He had left behind a small village in Yorkshire, and with it, memories too heavy to carry. London, he thought, would be a new beginning. But beginnings are strange things. Sometimes they start where someone else's story ended. He found Wren House by accident. A narrow lane led him to it, a crooked three-story home, its windows veiled by grime, its paint long surrendered to rot. The sign outside read, "For let, inquire within." No one else seemed to look twice at it. But Thomas did. He couldn't explain why. The house felt lonely, like it was waiting for someone. The landlady, Mrs. Holloway, was a frail old woman with trembling hands and pale eyes. "It's an old place," she said, when Thomas asked about the rent. "Too large for most men. And, not everyone stays long." "Why not?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Old houses remember things. Especially the ones built on sorrow." He laughed it off, though her words lingered in his chest like cold air. The rent was unbelievably cheap. Within a day, Thomas moved in. The first night was quiet, almost peaceful. Rain tapped softly against the windows, the fireplace groaned with the smell of damp wood, and the clock in the hall ticked louder than it should. At midnight, he woke to the sound of footsteps. Not loud, but measured, a soft rustling across the hallway. He froze. "Mrs. Holloway," he called out. Silence. Then, a faint whisper, "Thomas." He sat up, heart pounding. "Who's there?" The whisper faded into the wind. For a long while, he listened to the rain until sleep finally dragged him back down. The following day, he explored the house in daylight. Here's the setup before we dive in. Previous, Thomas rented the old Wren House and heard the whisper of Eleanor. Now, he'll uncover the locked room's secret and see her for the first time. Expect creaking halls, a portrait that changes, and a night that refuses to end. Candle Whispers of Wren House. Story 2, The Portrait in the Parlor. The second week in Wren House began with rain that never stopped. It washed the soot from the rooftops and filled the rooms with a cold, silver gloom. Thomas kept a small fire burning, but the heat never seemed to stay, it felt as if the walls themselves breathed frost. He had decided, against Mrs. Holloway's warning, to find out what hid behind the locked door. That morning, he searched the cellar for tools and found an iron key, old, bent, its teeth rust-eaten. It was tied with a strip of black ribbon. When he held it, a draft stirred through the house, carrying that same scent of lavender. He could have sworn a woman's breath brushed his ear. You shouldn't. But curiosity is its own ghost. He went upstairs, candle trembling in hand, until he stood before the sealed door. The key fit. The moment the lock turned, something inside seemed to sigh, as if relieved to be remembered. The room beyond was a parlor, untouched by time. Heavy curtains hung motionless. Dust lay thick over everything except one thing, a portrait above the mantel. A woman in a pale gown. Her face the same as in his dream, Eleanor Wren. Her painted eyes followed him. The brushwork was so lifelike he could almost see them glisten. He stepped closer. The air grew colder, his breath a mist. A drop of water slid down the canvas, from her eye. Not paint. A tear. Thomas stumbled back, heart hammering. The floor creaked behind him. He turned, nothing. Only the mirror in the corner, reflecting the portrait and his own frightened face. But for a second, there were two figures in that reflection. That night, the rain turned violent. Thunder rolled across London like distant cannon fire. Thomas sat by the fire, unable to read or think. Every few minutes, he looked toward the hallway, expecting movement. When the clock struck midnight, the house fell utterly still. Then came the whisper. "Thomas." He rose slowly. The voice came from the parlor. The locked door now stood ajar, though he was certain he had closed it. Inside, the portrait shimmered in the candlelight. The woman's painted lips parted slightly, as though she might speak. He felt the air press against his back, someone standing behind him. He didn't turn. Couldn't. A faint hand brushed his shoulder, cold, but not cruel. "You found me," the voice said, close enough that he felt the words rather than heard them. He turned at last. And there she was. Eleanor. Pale, translucent, her eyes gray as storm water. She looked neither alive nor dead, just lost. Thomas staggered back. "What are you?" Her answer came like a sigh. "Once. I was loved." She drifted toward the fireplace. The flames dimmed, shrinking as though afraid. For a moment she looked human again, the outline of her gown, the soft curve of her hand. Then she touched the portrait's frame and the whole room shuddered, pictures rattled, glass cracked, the fire died in an instant. Thomas fled to the corridor, slamming the door. He stood panting in the dark, his candle blown out. Through the wood came a faint hum, an old melody, sad and tender, the tune of a lullaby. And beneath it, another sound, scratching. Someone, or something, writing from the other side. When dawn came, he opened the door again. The portrait was the same, except for one difference. At the bottom corner, new words had appeared in the paint, still wet. "Don't leave me again." Story 3, The Haunting of the Heart. For days, Thomas could not leave the house. Each time he tried, fog swallowed the street and led him back to the same gate. It was as if Wren House itself had decided he would stay. He told himself the ghost was only memory, a fever dream from loneliness. But when he looked in mirrors, he saw two faces. And when he slept, he woke with the scent of lavender on his pillow and the feeling of someone's hand still resting on his chest. One evening he found her again, Eleanor, sitting in the parlor chair, looking at the dead fireplace. She appeared clearer now, almost human, her form shaped by moonlight. Thomas did not run this time. "Why are you here?" he asked. Her eyes lifted to his. "Because I remember." "Remember what?" "Love." Her voice cracked on the word, as though it hurt to speak it. Then she told him. In 1859, she had lived in this house with her husband, Charles Wren, a man twice her age and rich beyond need. He had built the house as a prison disguised as a home. Jealous, cold, he watched her every move. And when she fell in love with another, an artist hired to paint her portrait, Charles discovered it. The painter vanished. Days later, Eleanor was found dead in the very parlor where Thomas now stood. They said it was consumption. But the servants whispered otherwise. Since then, no tenant had stayed long. But now, after so many years, she said his name, Thomas, exactly as she had said his long ago. "You look like him," she whispered. "You speak like him. And when you walked through that door, I thought." She broke off, her voice fading like smoke. Thomas reached out, instinctively, and for an instant their fingers met. Cold fire rushed through his body. He saw flashes, her death, her screams, the painter's blood on the floor, the husband's shadow standing over them. He fell to his knees, gasping. When he looked up, she was gone. Only the portrait remained, its surface rippling like disturbed water. That night the house turned against him. Doors slammed without wind. The clock struck 13. Footsteps paced the hallway though he was alone. And from the walls came muffled sobs, Eleanor's voice calling his name over and over, pleading. He pressed his hands over his ears. "Stop. Please stop. But the whispers grew louder until they formed words. Stay with me, forever. He fled to the cellar, candle shaking. In the corner he found an old trunk bound with rope. Inside were letters, brittle with age, Eleanor's handwriting. Each ended the same way. He watches me. If I disappear, know that I loved once, and it killed me. And at the very bottom of the trunk lay something wrapped in linen, a skeleton hand clutching a ring. His candle flickered, the flame bent sideways as if something exhaled beside him. He ran upstairs, tripping on the steps, and burst into the parlor. The portrait had changed again. This time, the woman was smiling. A small, terrible smile that did not belong to her. Thunder rolled across the roof. Eleanor stood before the fireplace, no longer fragile or sorrowful. Her eyes were black voids, her voice came from everywhere at once. He kept me here, Thomas. Now you will keep me. The floorboards groaned as though the house itself was breathing. The walls pulsed with light, pale, sickly, heart-like. Thomas felt it drawing him in, each beat stealing warmth from his body. He cried out, Eleanor, please. For a second, her face softened. She looked human again, tears shining like glass. Then love me, she whispered. Or I will never rest. He reached toward her, his candle died. In the darkness, only her whisper remained, soft, sorrowful, endless. Don't leave me again. Story 4, Whispers of Wren House. The storm had not stopped for 3 days. Rain ran down the windows like tears, and the city outside seemed to disappear. Thomas no longer knew whether it was night or morning. Time had thinned inside Wren House, each hour folding into the next like paper burning at the edges. He hardly slept. When he did, he dreamed of her, Eleanor standing by his bed, reaching for him, whispering his name as if praying. Sometimes he woke to find her still there. Other times, she lingered only in the mirror. He had stopped fearing her. What frightened him now was how much he wanted her to stay. On the 4th night, he decided to end it. He would free her, or die trying. He lit every candle in the parlor. Their flames trembled, painting the walls with long, nervous shadows. The portrait above the fireplace seemed alive, its colors brighter, its eyes darker. He placed the skeleton hand he'd found in the cellar before it, the ring still clinging to its finger. This house is your prison, he whispered. But it's mine now too. Tell me what you want. The air grew dense. The candles bent backward as though the room inhaled. And then she appeared, Eleanor, half light, half memory, beautiful and broken. You cannot set me free, she said. Then tell me how. By remembering what love costs. She led him through the house, rooms that shouldn't exist, halls that curved into darkness. Each door opened to a moment not his own. A woman crying at a window. A man shouting in rage. A body falling. A scream that never ended. He saw the truth, Eleanor had not killed herself. Her husband had. He'd locked her in the parlor, painted over her portrait to hide her, and left her to die when she refused to confess her love for the painter. The house had swallowed her pain, and kept it alive. That night the house turned against him. Doors slammed without wind. The clock struck 13. Footsteps paced the hallway though he was alone. And from the walls came muffled sobs, Eleanor's voice calling his name over and over, pleading. He pressed his hands over his ears. Stop. Please stop. But the whispers grew louder until they formed words. Stay with me, forever. He fled to the cellar, candle shaking. In the corner he found an old trunk bound with rope. Inside were letters, brittle with age, Eleanor's handwriting. Each ended the same way. He watches me. If I disappear, know that I loved once, and it killed me. And at the very bottom of the trunk lay something wrapped in linen, a skeleton hand clutching a ring. His candle flickered, the flame bent sideways as if something exhaled beside him. He ran upstairs, tripping on the steps, and burst into the parlor. The portrait had changed again. This time, the woman was smiling. A small, terrible smile that did not belong to her. Thunder rolled across the roof. Eleanor stood before the fireplace, no longer fragile or sorrowful. Her eyes were black voids, her voice came from everywhere at once. He kept me here, Thomas. Now you will keep me. The floorboards groaned as though the house itself was breathing. The walls pulsed with light, pale, sickly, heart-like. Thomas felt it drawing him in, each beat stealing warmth from his body. He cried out, "Eleanor, please." For a second, her face softened. She looked human again. "You remind me of him," she said. "But you are kinder." She touched his cheek. It burned like ice. "If you stay," she whispered, "I will never be alone again." Thomas felt the house tremble around them. The wallpaper peeled, revealing brick streaked with blood. The candles flared high, then one by one went out. He understood what she meant. If he stayed, the house would live again, fed by his soul. He looked into her eyes. They were no longer ghostly, but human, filled with sorrow. He took her hand. "Then let's both be free." For the first time, Eleanor smiled. A real smile. He pulled the ring from the skeleton's finger and placed it in her hand. "I forgive you," he whispered. "And I forgive him." The walls groaned. The portrait above them caught fire without smoke. Flames curled around Eleanor's face, and the house screamed, a sound like wind tearing through graves. Eleanor's form flickered. "Thomas," she said softly, "thank you." Then she was gone. The fire died. The silence that followed was heavier than death. When morning came, Mrs. Holloway found the front door open and the house empty. No trace of Thomas Gray was ever seen again. Only the portrait remained, restored, undamaged, and different. The woman was smiling. And beside her stood a man, his hand resting gently over hers. Underneath, a new inscription glimmered faintly in the paint. "Together at last."